This next one is much more exciting.
Yeah.
Kansas City Chiefs, you got a lot of guys. There's a lot of scoring to go around here, a lot to be excited about. Let's start with Pat Mahomes. I'll just spoil it for you. He's your QB1 on both lists.
Bold.
Right. 424 attempts, 424 completions, 640 attempts, over 5,200 yards, 47 touchdowns, 10 picks, and a not insignificant 57 rushes for 285 and a couple touchdowns. You have to think that would be higher if they weren't so paranoid about him getting hurt. He certainly could rush more than that if he wanted to. Big numbers. I mean, is there really anything to say? Other than just like, man, he's awesome.
Yes, that. And I think the only thing to add is the fact they've improved this offensive line. Now, we haven't seen it yet through the preseason, them really gel. He's been under a little bit of duress already. So I don't want to sit here and say it's guaranteed the line's going to be so much better. But you look at what they did. Orlando Brown, great trade acquisition. Joe Thuney, as a Patriots fan, you can't ask for a more reliable guy, whether in the run or the pass games. Drafting Mack at center, just great, like all-around improvements across the offensive line. They were ranked, I think, bottom 5 last year. Now in the preseason, they're projected to be in the top 15 units. So that's a big leap. When you think about a guy like Pat Mahomes, you give him of course, protection helps all quarterbacks, but you give a guy like Mahomes an extra second or two, and a guy like Tyreek on the outside an extra second or two. That's the difference between like a 5-yard check down to the running back and an 80-yard bomb down the field. So that's why I have him thrown for the most yards of his career, potentially at 47 touchdowns. We've already seen him do 50. So that could be an underestimate here if this line truly gels and holds him up for more time to get downfield. But yeah, there's really not much else to say other than this guy is a god, a freak player that we haven't seen maybe ever. So I cannot wait to see what he does if he gets better protection.
All right. This one maybe not as exciting, but probably a little more to unpack. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 223 carries, a little over 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, 37 receptions for 307, 2 touchdowns. In this offense, the running back has a ton of value. And we agree that Clyde has got a lot of potential, definitely a strong runner and all that. But you kind of like McKinnon, which maybe is lessening your CEH appeal. Is that right?
That's kind of what's happened since the start of the preseason. I was all in on Clyde mid-second round. I mean, last year we were clearly all in on him mid-first round. It just didn't pan out. But Andy Reid has been so fantasy-friendly, from Brian Westbrook to Jamal Charles to LaShawn McCoy. I mean, there has just been fantasy monster after fantasy monster. I think it's something around the lines of 74% of his running backs have been true top 12 guys, and like 62% of those were top 5 guys. I mean, it is a very fantasy-friendly offense for the backs, but they're already talking about Jarryd McKinnon eating into that receiving workload. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has a high ankle sprain in this game. And he was logging all the snaps with the starters before that ankle sprain, so there was some promising signs, but that can't help the coaching staff feel great about using this guy as a true every down monster. Darrell Williams was sneaking in there for short yardage and goal line work last year. And you know how cute they get at the stripe. So it's kind of crazy to project like an offense that I think will lead the league in points, only giving their top running back 7 touchdowns on the ground and 2 through the air. But you've seen how many times last year where it was like Travis Kelce gets an end around score. The fullback gets like a little shovel pass score. They just never want to give it to Clyde at the goal line. So I'm not going to project him for a high touchdown share. And then if he's also having receiving work nibbled at by Jarryd McKinnon, well, now you're losing 2 of the most valuable sources of fantasy points right there. If he becomes just another between the 20 guys, which we saw last year, it's like a between the 20 guys and a Chiefs offense is more valuable than most, but still kind of purgatory for running backs. So yeah, I'm a little bit lower than him. He's kind of fallen to 3rd round, the top of 3rd round on my big board, but not quite as high as I was just a few weeks ago.
And projections, you got him as your RB20. You actually like him more than your projections. I think you got him at 14 on the big board, amongst running backs, not overall. Worth mentioning, before we get too excited about Jarryd McKinnon, how many times has Jarryd McKinnon been the death of us?
Yeah. And death might be a little bit of an exaggeration because it's like you're
I don't know, man.
Rounder. But yes, we've fallen for this guy, Nat, too many times. Like
we had him as a 2nd round guy. 3-4 years ago.
when he first got to
San Francisco.
San Fran, Kyle Shanahan.
You loved that guy. And
Of course.
I was all in too. I was like, this is the guy. And
that was a lot of a bet on Kyle Shanahan's offense as much as it was on McKinnon's play.
It has soured me towards him forever.
And it should. It deserves to be. But this is the thing with him is this is the lowest we've seen him drafted in the last, whenever. He's in the most explosive offense he's ever been in, looking as the best pass catching back. And now you have injuries to Hilaire, and Darrell Williams picks up a concussion. Sure, McKinnon's been working in as the third back. This is potentially opening up the door for him to carve out some meaningful value in a Pat Mahomes offense, especially if you have like Mahomes in your best ball leagues or whatever, and you want to stack up him at the running back position. Would not be shocked at all to see Jarryd McKinnon haul in 4, and that's what I have him for.
Right.
265 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns. I think he's going to be a little bit of a bane to Hilaire owners and carve out a potentially meaningful enough role for himself. Yeah.
All right. It doesn't sound crazy when you say it like that. All right, Tyreek Hill. Let's talk about monster numbers here. You got him for 96 catches, over 1,400 yards, 14 touchdowns. That's on 147 targets. Of course, you got the additional 16 rushes for $144 and 2 touchdowns. And I mean, who knows on punt returns, kick returns, whatever they decide to throw that guy in for. He is the fastest guy I've ever seen in the NFL. I don't know. I mean, maybe somebody can come up with somebody as fast, but he has stunning speed. He's been talking trash with Usain Bolt recently about a 70-yard matchup, which I would certainly watch. By the way, those numbers for Tyreek put him as your wide receiver 2 on the big board, but actually number 1 on your projections. You actually have him with slightly better numbers than Davante Adams. The real question is the second guy. Right now you have it as Mecole Hardman, wide receiver 49, 54 on the big board, putting up 58 catches, 800 yards, 6 touchdowns on 90 targets. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, starting with the big man at the top. Real quick on him, like it seems like there's nothing else that you really need to say about Tyreek because of how explosive he is. We all know that. But I do want to point out the second half of last year, from I believe it was week 9 onward, he saw almost 11 targets per game. Now, that was because of injuries around him and whatnot, but he had more targets per game than Davante Adams and everybody else in the NFL as well over that span. And we saw, 19 target, 18 target, 15 target game. And we saw 50-point days, 35-point days. If that volume stayed steady all year coming into this year, like there's a ceiling to Tyreek that somehow we haven't seen yet. You'd think we've already seen it all, but we haven't. And that's why I have him ranked up there, as you said, in half PPR, higher than Adams. In full PPR, he's just a few below Adams, given how much more he catches the ball. But it is neck and neck. They're kind of in a tier and a class by themselves. Alongside, I guess you can work in Stephon Diggs there too, as the only guys I would consider in round 1 at the wide receiver position. There is just, like I was saying, there's just definitely some upside with Tyreek Hill that we might not have even seen yet, which seems so crazy. But yeah, Hardman is my bet right now to be number 2. A lot of people's bet. We had Nate Taylor on our podcast, the Athletics chief reporter, saying Hardman looks like a new receiver, both in how he's practicing, just maturity, the way he's picked it up, but also in his route running, a more diverse tree. Thing is he's kind of been interchangeable with Byron Pringle so far this preseason. Last game, preseason week 2, was certainly more encouraging to see him in there in all both 11 and 12 personnel usage, but we also didn't have Tyreek Hill on the field, whereas the week before, Mecole Hardman wasn't working in for those snaps. So I still think it's a little bit of a clusterfuck there. Like, I don't know that we'll get anything truly consistent beyond Tyreek Hill. And, of course, the next guy we discussed in a second, Travis Kelce, and how much more he needs to say about that guy. But it's still worth a stab. It's a aerial pie led by Mahomes. And if anything ever did happen to Tyreek, someone's going to have to step up and be his number 1 receiver. I think it'd be Hardman, but I'm starting to really warm up to Pringle, who had 4 catches, 60 yards, and just a half of action with Mahomes in this last preseason game. Just so reliable, always open, great on the broken plays. Mecole Hardman goes about 6 rounds, more expensive than Byron Pringle. So to me, I've actually found myself having a lot more Byron Pringles on my team, even if I think Hardman is the more exciting bet. Pringle's cost has led me to him a lot more these days.
All right, real quick, we're going to go to Kelce. And, again, there's not a ton to say about him, but we'll say it anyway. 103 catches, 1,300 yards, 12 touchdowns on 147 targets. That's the same you got Tyreek getting, and that is good enough for tight end 1 on both of your lists. I want to just give you some auction values. At the auction I had on Thursday, this is one auction. I just want to tell you how much some of these Chiefs went for, and interested to know what you think about that.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So Mahomes went for $36.
Too much for a quarterback, that.
Of course I know that, but I mean the next highest guy was, I want to say, $20 or $18. So to spend 36 on Mahomes, you actually have to think he's going to put up literally double the stats of Josh Allen. That's insane. We agree.
Right.
Tyreek went for 57.
Pretty fair.
And Kelce went for 56.
And I have Kelce higher on my big board than Tyreek. So of those guys, I'd prefer Kelce the most because of how big of an edge he is, right? Like, I think he had 70 more points than Darren Waller, who had a breakout season, massive season as a tight end too. He had like 150 more than the tight end 6. It's insane how big of an edge this guy gives you, right? Like, ridiculous.
Clyde went for 42 for whatever it's worth.
That's a little too much for me. That's a little too rich for my blood.
Yeah, me too. Anyway, talk about, blow smoke up Kelce's ass for a few seconds.
Right. You don't need me to do too much longer than that. 5 straight years as the tight end 1, hasn't missed a game over that span. Knock on wood, don't want to jinx the guy. But truly, unlike Tyreek, I guess the only fault, and it's not really a fault, is I think last year was his ceiling. And I'm not saying he can't repeat that. Whereas Tyreek still has a level that we might not have seen. But what else do you need to see with Kelce? 1,400 yards, 15 touchdowns from your tight end is fucking insane, given how bad and barren the positional landscape typically is. So, yeah, to me, he's worth anything top 6. I would not – if he falls below 6, you should be scooping him up in every single draft. If you took him as high as number 1, I honestly wouldn't give you too much grief. I think McCaffrey is certainly worth the first overall pick. But the edge that you get with Kelce, you can make that case for. And there's just the highest possible floor. You have Mahomes, the best quarterback in the game. You have a guy who has not missed any time and has been the number 1 tight end in 5 straight years. What else do you need?
Yeah. We're way past the prove it part. Right. He's proven it.
He's unbelievable. What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments. Check out some more videos and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.